بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما نافعا والحقنا بعبادك الصالحين. آمين آمين. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, إِنَّا أَنزَلْنَاهُ قُرْآنًا عَرَبِيًّا. Verily we have revealed it in Arabic Quran. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَرْفَعِ اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا مِنْكُمْ وَالَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمَ دَرَجَاتٍ. Allah elevates the position of those who believe, and for those who are given ilm or knowledge is a higher status. And Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, من سلك طريقا يلتمس فيه علما سهل الله له طريقا إلى الجنة. Whoever treads the path of knowledge, Allah makes easy for him the path to Jannah. All of us, no matter what we are, aspire to know a certain amount about our religion, and we aspire to learn a certain amount, some more than others. And all of us, at some point in our lives, have aspired to understand the Quran. And all of us, I think without a doubt, if we were to listen to the Quran being recited in Salah and understand it, it would help us concentrate in Salah. So all of us as Muslims, our objective is to understand the Quran, to enhance our knowledge, and so on and so forth. And the ayat and the ahadith that I mentioned supplement this fact of learning. However, the question arises, how do we learn? What's the correct method of learning? What should we learn? What I can say is that all learning in Islam stems from the Arabic language, all of it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran in the Arabic language, and Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, his sunnah was conveyed to us in the language that he spoke, which was the Arabic language, and from there all the sciences of Islam progressed. And Imam al-Shatibi, may Allah have mercy on him, said that a person's knowledge of the religion is only as much as his knowledge of the Arabic language. This gives credence to the argument, or to the fact actually, that the Arabic language is from where knowledge of Islam stems. And Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, بُعِثْتُ لِيُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was sent to perfect al-akhlaq, because the Arabs within themselves had a certain amount of akhlaq, and they had certain characteristics that allowed them to build on that, and when Islam came, it completed those characteristics. From those characteristics which were present was the language of the Arab, was a language of Arabic. And Arabic in itself holds certain things in its poetry and its literature and in the culture that allow us to take good from it, that enhance in a person and cultivate in a person certain characteristics of goodness, like truthfulness, good character, bravery. All those things are present from before Islam, in Jahiliyyah, from the poetry and from what was looked as being praised, or something that was looked upon with status, was when you had these characteristics. And poets spoke about these characteristics in their poetry. And Umar ibn al-Khattab, he told people to learn the poetry of Shanfara, his qasida, because Shanfara in his qasida speaks about certain good characteristics that are universal. Not only Muslims agree upon them, but are universal. And Umar ibn al-Khattab also said, عَلِّمُوا أَوْلَادَكُمْ أَوْ تَعَلَّمُوا الْعَرَبِيَّةَ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ دِينِكُمْ. Learn the Arabic language because it is from your religion. So now the question comes about, how should we learn the Arabic language? What's the proper method of learning the Arabic language? Does it not suffice us to just learn the Quran or see the translation? Is this sufficient? And the Arabic language, once we start learning it, how then do we progress to start understanding the Quran? All these questions come about. The question comes about also, how does a person learn the Arabic language without being in an environment as Arabic? Is it so important in religion as I'm saying? I will tell you how it is, inshallah. All of us know that the Quran was revealed in the Arabic language, and we know that the Sunnah of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in Arabic. We also know some who know more than one language will know this fact, that language in itself carries culture. Language in itself carries culture, meaning that a language cannot be translated into a different language and carry the exact same meaning. The translation only carries a commentary or understanding of the translator, deeper understandings and different points of views, and what the language may carry in itself cannot be translated from any language, not from English to Arabic, not from Arabic to English, not to Persian, not to any language. Those who know more than one language will understand what I'm trying to say. You see it in certain sayings, you see it in certain things in the language. You are able to convey certain ideas in some language better than others, in some topics of a language better than others. In English, there may be certain topics that you can convey better in the English language compared to, for example, Urdu, and vice versa. Certain cultural traits are also carried in that language. So a language in itself cannot be translated to convey the complete meaning into another language. It's impossible. The only way to derive and understand the complete meaning and keep it in its proper essence is to learn the language itself. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran to us in the Arabic language for that reason, so that there would be no differing. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose this language because this language in certain aspects is superior to other languages. So if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran to us as a message for us, so that we may understand, so that we may ponder, so that we may take lesson, so that we may worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the manner that was prescribed to us in the Holy Quran and through the Sunnah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then it is only befitting for us to learn the Arabic language. And if we claim to love Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and we claim to love Allah, so those who claim to love Allah will love His Messenger, and they love the book that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent, and they love the language that it was sent in. And if they love Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then they love the language that he spoke, and they will love this language, and they learn the language, obviously. And if we claim to want to learn, and we claim to love Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then look at the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, نحن معاشر الأنبياء لا نورث دينارا ولا درهما وإنما نورث العلم. He said, we the brotherhood of the prophets do not leave behind inheritance of dinars and dirhams, no monetary value. وإنما نورث العلم, but verily we leave behind al-ilm, knowledge. And all knowledge stems from learning the language before you can take from something else in terms of knowledge itself, being a student of knowledge. People who learn aspects of Islam through a different medium besides the Arabic language are only culturing themselves. They have not even begun to scratch the surface of, or even entered the introductory levels of starting to learn Islam. The religion, in terms of sciences, can only be learned through the Arabic language. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that his inheritance and the inheritance of the prophets is knowledge. So if you claim to love Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, you will want to take from his inheritance, and those who take from his inheritance more are better. فَمَنْ أَخَذَ بِي فَقَدْ أَخَذَ بِحَظٍ وَافِرٍ. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, whoever has taken from it has taken from a great share. So I urge all Muslims to focus themselves on learning the Arabic language, because that will help us come together as one people. It will help us understand the culture in which the religion was revealed, which the Quran was revealed and the religion came down to the people. It will help us strengthen our safs, our lines as believers. And in fact, learning the Arabic language does not only have the benefit of Islam. Over 400 million people speak the Arabic language as a mother tongue. Over 130 million people speak it as a second language. The economic and political climate in the Middle East today dictate that it's one of the most important languages to learn. So not only having a benefit religiously, but a worldly benefit as well, the Arabic language can benefit you. How should we learn it? It's common practice that people, when they begin to learn a language, there are certain methods that are used. The Arabic language, The methods that were introduced for all languages is a skill method, meaning where certain skills need to be developed and a person naturally acquires the language. Through reading, meaning mastering the skill of reading, mastering the skill of writing, mastering the skill of listening with comprehension obviously, and mastering the skill of expressing, these 4 skills. And if you go to any university in the Middle East or any institute that teaches a language, you will find that naturally they start with this method. Obviously institutes in the Arab world. If you go to institutes in the Indo-Pak region or in the non-Arab world, or formal institutes in the West, you see that they use the approach of grammar. And it's a very, very, very methodical and academic approach. Both of them have their pros and cons. The method that was described first, the natural method, the benefits of it is that the language, once you acquire it, comes to you naturally. Once you acquire it. And also that approach there shows a sort of progression that yields fruits at the earlier level. You start conversing and certain things at a much quicker pace. However, the cons of this method is that you need an environment that supports it. So if you're sitting at home in a non-Arab environment, it becomes extremely difficult. It's extremely memory based. So you need a strong memory to begin with. The third thing, the method works well with people who have a knack for languages. And the last thing, if you don't have these three aspects that I described previously, you will feel like you're not learning. You can go a long time and you won't learn. And lastly, the person needs to, from the beginning, be outright motivated to speak and to converse and to apply what is learned. If the person is not motivated enough to apply what they learned, or they're shy, in other words, they're going to think the method doesn't work. The other method, which is where grammar and morphology and these things are taught, the advantage is that you start seeing structures, but the disadvantage is that there's no application. What I think is a middle way is that a person starts with a method of grammar and morphology, and not all of the syllabi that exist or books that exist that teach this method are conducive. Some of them teach it in a way where you learn a lot of grammar and morphology in an order that doesn't make sense, and only after a long period of time or lots of lessons do things start falling into place, and even then you confuse certain aspects because it all mixes up. I would think that the most ideal way to learn would be to take the right amount of grammar and morphology to determine certain structures in a language that help you build upon once you start using the natural method. Meaning, example, if you know how certain verbs are morphed, or you know how to identify nouns, and you know how to give their plurals, if you know how to identify a nominal sentence from a verbal sentence, and how to alter them, just these basic things, then when you get into the approach of the skill based approach, you will then be able to take those phrases that you learn and you need to express and you hear and you write and you read and alter them based on the grammar and morphology that you know. But taking one approach without the other requires a long amount of time, or a longer amount of time, to see fruits. The skill based approach, very memory intensive, so it takes a long amount of time, and you get to a certain point where you start understanding, and then you learn grammar and the grammar becomes boring and your language always stays broken because you don't understand the nuances of the language. In the grammar based approach or the methodical approach, what happens is that you have this methodical manner of learning and it goes on for a long time, and then when you try to introduce the skill based approach, your mind is too slow at working. You don't see the method. You're always breaking down things and it becomes difficult to learn. So the best way, and that's what we do at Al-Manar, and the way I teach, is to merge these two methods. You teach a certain amount of grammar, and when the student has enough information to understand the structures of language, you jump into the skill-based approach. And thereafter use a skill-based approach, and if things do come about which are different from the grammar that was taught, you can always introduce a lesson here and there of grammar to supplement what the students are learning. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.